We are going live right now. Yeah, it should be working. What an insanity. I really appreciate your patience. Yeah, okay. We are live. Just waiting for Mattie. So anyway, now we're live, Mike. I'm going to jump in with the question I've been dying to ask you. What does it feel like?
I can answer it.
Well, we had a commenter who said, if anyone knows his squids, it's Mike Vecchione. He's the squid goat. I don't know if you know what goat means.
I do. I'm not that old.
How does it feel to be the squid goat? That was my ultimate question that I was burning to ask while we were waiting.
Well, I've been around for a while, so I've had quite a bit of experience.
Well, what was your first experience with a squid? Like, what led you down this fateful eight-legged path?
Okay, here we go. After I finished undergraduate, I went in the Army for a while. I got out of the Army and, just before I got out of the Army, I found out there was a graduate school close to where I was stationed. It was the Virginia Institute of Marine Science, which is part of William and Mary. So I applied there and I got an interview to go to grad school there. And when I interviewed with it, I didn't know the guy I was talking to. He asked me what I wanted to do. And I said, I don't know. I've been in the Army for a long time. And I don't know what's hot. The only thing I know for sure is I don't want to work on a microscope. And it turned out the guy was the head of the plankton department. So his revenge was to give me an assistantship sorting plankton under a microscope. And then somebody showed me how to do it. And the first sample I pulled off the shelf to sort all by myself, I poured it out. And the biggest squid I've ever seen in a plankton sample popped out into the tray. And I said, that's what I want to work on right there.
How big was it?
Oh, it was what's now called dory tooth. So it was a long fin inshore squid. And it was about, I don't know, 6 inches long or so.
About how many species of squid do you have in your mental Rolodex?
My mental Rolodex is pretty rusty. So I usually go to a website called the Tree of Life, which I've worked on with Dick Young quite a lot. And that's got a lot of the information. And I also have other resources available. So right now I've got the Tree of Life website open on my computer. And I also have the FAO, the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization, the FAO Guide to Cephalopods open as well.
Well, how many of those, sorry, I keep going deeper down this rabbit hole, but how many of those listings would you have contributed to?
Oh, a lot.
Very mysterious.
Yeah, I can't tell you an exact number, but
it's the humble squid.
A humble squid man. We also have Mattie Rodrigude on here, who is our science program lead. So a lot of people who watched the video yesterday will obviously recognize the face and the voice. She was on board when we had this, actually so was I, this strange sighting. And Mattie, do you want to just briefly describe why we're out there in the first place and whether we were expecting to see what we saw?
Sure. Yeah. So the expedition that we were on, as you guys probably saw from the video, was a request from some collaborators in the Neom region of the Red Sea, northern Red Sea area in the Gulf of Aqaba. And we were doing a full multidisciplinary ecosystem assessment. So we were using all of the tools on the ship to understand everything from below the seafloor to the seafloor, throughout the entire water column, the surface of the water and all the animals that live there. And then also we were doing aerial surveys and terrestrial surveys. So we're looking at the land masses and the animals that were really associated tightly with those land masses, especially because this area had never been fully surveyed and a lot of people didn't realize what was there. So pretty much we had been marching our way systematically up, starting in the northern region of the Red Sea, and then making our way up through to the northern part of the Gulf of Aqaba. So we were doing a lot of mapping, a lot of seafloor mapping using our ship sonars, getting some 3D high resolution images of what the seabed looked like for the first time ever for science. So what we would do is map the night before, and then we'd send in the submersibles and we send in the ROV and do what we call characterization dives. So looking at the habitat that made up that 3D map of the seafloor. And so the ROV is 6,000 meter depth rated and the subs are 1,000 meter depth rated. So the ROV would start deeper than the subs, and maybe the focus would be, geology. So we'd have the geologist sitting in mission control, looking at like all the cool rocks and all of the sediment and everything and taking samples. And then the subs would be a little bit higher up in what we call the mesophotic, so between 200 and 300 meters, and looking at really amazing mesophotic reefs. And so then the ROV would meet up with the subs, and everybody would do their little mechanical arm fist bump, and then bring the samples up to the surface, and we just rinse and repeat. Meanwhile, the dive tender is doing shallow water surveys or coral reefs. So basically, we had been going through, marching along this very systematic type of ecosystem survey. And so the funniest part of the whole video to me was when Colleen, the survey technician who was on at the time, she's running all of the mapping sonars. She came up to me at breakfast in the mess at 7 a.m. and she said, I know we have a plan for today, but I think the plan is going to change. And of course, for me, I have like a tightly wound clock on board, and everything has to have its certain place, and every department has to be doing what it's supposed to be doing to get the scientific data and make sure our collaborating scientists on board are all happy. And so I sort of like twitched for a minute, and I was like, okay, show me. So we went into mission control, and she pointed at this anomaly, and she said, I think it might be a shipwreck. And
Let me see if I can bring up a picture of that anomaly because it's super cool.
It's just a little nubbin basically on the seabed.
Just for people who don't know, like there are, what would you call them underside the ship? They're like sonar. They're instruments that send out sound waves. Yep. And as the sound waves bounce back up off the seafloor, they paint like a 3D picture. So I'll share the picture of what we got. Can you guys see that? So obviously this thing here stood out enormously like a sore thumb, or like so we were planning to do dives and look at coral and stuff. And then there's this whole, what is that? And Colleen, the technician who stays up overnight, creating these maps out of a void. Like otherwise it's just a black map, right, Mattie? And then we have like, okay, this is how and where we go. And so she saw this. What did you think when you first saw it, Mattie, when she showed this picture?
I remember I had a cup of coffee in my hand, and I just set my coffee down and I went like this because I thought it was a wreck, but I also, and we'll go into this a little bit later, the sort of like fun betting that we had on board, rock or wreck, but I kept the faith the whole time. I thought I just had in my gut, I knew it was a wreck, but also because Colleen is one of the best in the world at what she does, which is mapping the seafloor. And she specifically found the anomaly and then had to make the decision, okay, do I slow the ship down and go really slowly and get a lot of the sound, a lot of the sonar pings over this anomaly back and forth to see if it's just, a feature or if it could be something more. And so she was pretty confident it was going to be a wreck. And so she was working the night shift. So she actually went to bed, but she said, I know we're going to dive this today. So when we get there, wake me up, which is, you never hear an overnight person say that, but this was a big deal for her.
Yeah, she had to call up to the bridge, which is where the guys driving the ship are, which is like 3 floors above, at like 3 a.m. and be like, okay, go really slow at these coordinates. And it's just really, and before we go too much further, we have Nick here, Nick Capezzera. He's like an amazing filmmaker, and he also works at OceanX as an editor. And he sifted through all this footage to make the video. So I just thought it'd be really fun to have you here, Nick, because I know he has a lot of questions about like what he saw as well. Nick, if you just want to say hi, and I don't know if I left you.
No, thank you for, this is my first live with OceanX. I mean, I've worked on so many different, projects and topics and issues, but I mean, the discovery aspect of working for OceanX and seeing all the footage, that is, I'm going on the journey as I look through the footage. And, I think, everyone has like deep down, they want to discover something, whether it's, in the ocean or, digging for treasure. And every time that I get to look through this footage, I get to go on the journey, and it is like, my jaw's dropping. I'm going, wow, I can't believe that I get to see this before anyone else. So thank you, Mattie and Mike, and thanks to Colleen for slowing the ship down. I had definitely questions about, I've heard you explain it so many times, but how, that works. I was like, oh, as Erika said it, I was wondering, like, wow, is Colleen controlling the ship? But obviously the squid, and she has to call up and say, slow it down. And, do you go, how long does it take to go back and forth? And anyway, we can get to that later, but it's just really exciting getting to see all the new research and all the discoveries that get made on board the Ocean Explorer.
Well, so actually that leads me to like what happened next, which was, as Mattie said, we were like, okay, like pull the brakes. We're going to dive this today, like other plans out the window. We have this picture of the anomaly. We have a whiteboard in mission control where one says rock and one says wreck, and people are leaving their names underneath, betting what it is. Mattie and I are both on the winning team. And so like, Nick, you got to see the footage of, I think of start to finish, of the ROVs in the water, which is a giant vehicle, which is like the size of a Hummer, and it's got cameras on all sides of it, and it's attached to the ship by this giant cable that streams up what it's seeing every second, and it's recording that so that then someone like Nick gets the footage later if we want to make a video. So can you tell us like what you saw from that footage of the ROV being lowered and when we first realized what it was?
I mean, I worked on the brine pool video as well with Sam Perkis, and so like he said, so much is discovered in like the last minutes, the last seconds of of the ROV dive, and you might be down there for hours. But looking at the map that was created, I mean, this might just be a basic take on it, but it does kind of look like the shape of a boat, when you just look at the 3D map. And then as the ROV got closer, you started to see artifacts that were on the ground, or on the seafloor rather, from the shipwreck.
Well, Mattie, you said that the ROV pilots had we got closer and they knew what we're going to see.
Yeah, so that was one of the sighting of the squid was, I'll never forget, because it was we had this bet going, rock or wreck, right? And we had pretty much everybody on the ship involved, and the guys that run our ROV department have like cumulatively 3 to 4 decades of experience commercially diving with ROVs, doing salvage, doing science, doing exploration, but also like historic wreck, discovering historic wrecks, finding historic wrecks, and then like excavating and doing archaeological work with various governments and institutions. And so they know their shipwrecks. And so we were descending with the ROV, and this big swordfish came out of nowhere. It was like probably 500 meters down. This big swordfish came out of nowhere, straight at the ROV, and then veered off. And the ROV team leader, Andrew, turns to me. I'm sitting right behind them, logging data. And he turns to me dead in the eye and goes, "It's a wreck." Like that, I know it. It's a wreck. And because they'd seen that, like these large animals sort of like using these as like aggregating devices is how I think, but it was so interesting. And so then I knew, okay, I was like, okay, we're going to see something. And then as Nick says, we get down to the bottom, we start seeing debris. And then like 5 minutes along the transect of the debris, then there's the Pala Aqaba.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was like a railing here, a chair there. Luckily, so we didn't actually know what wreck it was until we had to actually go around the bow of the ship to like look for a name. And then we were able to input the name, and it sank in 2011. It was a ferry. Luckily there was only one death, and apparently it was someone who wasn't following safety procedures who evacuated early. So it's a bit of a tragedy, but they had hundreds of people on board, and almost everyone else got off safely. So now we get to the part where things get weird. what were we bombed by something mysterious on the way to this wreck, Mattie?
No, we had been sort of body slammed by what we thought were squid on previous dives, just because, as Mike and I were talking about the video, there was the big shuddering jolt. And then I liked Mike's expression, the squid goes blah, and then shoots out ink everywhere. So we knew there was squid around, but we didn't we hadn't gotten visual confirmation of squid, and we didn't know that they were going to be large. We thought they were just going to be sort of like the normal sort of, I would say, like bite-sized for a whale or something, a sperm whale or something, or a toothed whale or something type of size squid. But we actually were looking at the coral colonization on the bow of the wreck, because there was a rope and it had these like beautiful, I think they were gorgonians or something. One of our mesophotic reef guys was like, "Oh, gorgonian, it's so beautiful." And we were focusing on it. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the squid photobombed our nice, lovely coral shoot.
If we can find it. So Mike, how long did it take you to identify? So we were all like, oh my God, first of all, it's the biggest squid we've ever seen live. Second of all, we were like, is it the giant squid? Because that would be huge for this region. I was gonna buy shares in like a giant squid spotting business in Egypt, like immediately after. But then we knew we had to come to the squid goat to make sure. How long did it take you to identify this species?
I knew immediately that it was not an Architeuthis, which is the genus for giant squid.
How could you tell?
Based on the body proportions, and especially the fins, they're shaped differently on a giant squid. And just from looking at this, I knew what family it was, and I also knew that in that area, in the Red Sea, northern Red Sea, they have a lot of these purple-back flying squids, and that in that species, they have a very complex population structure up in that area of the world, and it includes a giant form. So I knew there was a giant form of this purple-back flying squid. But
have they seen them before though? Like they know about it. Do they know about it from fishermen, or like?
Yeah, they know about it from fishermen, but also the Russians did some submersible dives in that area back in the 1960s, and they published in Russian about it. But I talked to some of my colleagues.
Very helpful.
Actually, I think it's since been translated into English. But
okay.
So it wasn't a terribly big surprise to see them. I'll tell you what's surprising to me, which is that I think somewhere in the video you say that you did 3 dives, mm-hmm. and you saw either this squid or others like it on every dive. And I don't know of any record of squids aggregating on a shipwreck like that. And so, I'm wondering if that's something that's happening there and we just don't know about it. And actually, I got a question on Facebook from somebody about this, and they wanted me to find out if all 3 dives were the same day or if it was 3 separate days.
Nope. So the first dive was on the wreck, and that was the first sighting, which is the video where it looks kind of greenish, and it's going around the bow. And that was the only sighting that we had on that dive. Then we did a dive in a completely different location where we had the bait, and it was the red lighting, and we had the little light lure on the end, and then the squid. Yeah, exactly. That was a completely different location. And then that squid, that's why I thought that they were 2 different squid, obviously, because we were miles apart. But then the submersibles went back probably 3 or 4 weeks later, and then did 2 consecutive dives, and then saw the footage that Erika showed, the really high res of it, and it's closer to the stern, not around the bow. Yeah. So and then that's that one. Yeah. So that was a completely different, like weeks later.
That's a beautiful shot.
Maybe they do hang out around shipwrecks. And
So what would that mean, apart from them kind of seeming like they're forming an evil society and it's their HQ? Why would that be interesting to a Ceph expert, that they're aggregating and hanging out kind of in groups?
Well, we don't know a whole lot about the behavior of deep sea cephalopods. And so this would be a piece in the puzzle that if they're actually aggregating on a structure like that, it might not be a shipwreck. Maybe they hang out in particular deep reef areas or something like that. We always figured that family, the Omistrophidae, they're very active swimmers, and they're vertical migrators. They go up to the surface at night and back down. So we figured that they're just open water animals, but you've got some evidence indicating that may not be true all of the time.
Right, because the one that's pulled up right now, that was in more open water. Like there wasn't any defining features or anything around. Like the ROV was in the midwater, and was had the lure on and the bait and everything. And you don't see that the manipulator arm in the ROV is actually holding on to the tail of the fish, trying to entice it. Yeah, there you go. That's
oh yeah, right here.
Yeah, and then the squid comes in. But yeah, so that was in a completely different location. But the 3 visits to the actual wreck itself, pretty much instantaneously, like within 10, 15 minutes of the dives, each individual dive, I would say they saw an individual. Now, whether it was the same individual, I don't know because I wasn't on the sub dives, but yeah.
For this footage here, someone had what we see here is like a shadow come in that is off camera, and then a cloud of ink. And someone on YouTube had a wicked question, which was they picked up the information that we kept getting body slammed, like this would happen frequently. And they wanted to know, like, are the squids territorial, or like, why would they be doing that?
More likely that they were attracted to the lights of the ROV or the sub. That's how they attract squids when they're fishing for them, is by shining really bright lights in the water. And
how do squids deal with that when they have huge sensitive eyes and live in like such darkness? Doesn't it blind them or hurt them? Like, how do we know how that works?
That's a really good question. Squids actually have pupils that they can contract. So they can adjust their eyes to bright lights, but not all deep sea animals can. And we know that some deep sea animals basically are blinded by the lights of subs. The retinas are damaged by the intense light. Whether that's happening with the squids is a different question, because like I said, they can adjust to the bright lights.
And this here is ink, right?
Yeah, that's ink floating in the water.
And it's what's it made up of?
Well, the dark part of it is melanin.
Melanin.
Melatonin is what you take to go. The dark part is melanin, and then it's suspended in a mucus. And the squid can actually control the relative proportions of mucus and water and stuff like that. So they can make a really dense blob of ink, or they can make a more diffuse cloud of ink, which is what you're seeing in this video.
Yeah, and that I read somewhere, what's it called? Like a phantom, something.
A pseudomorph.
A pseudomorph. Can you explain what
make
that
a
is?
blob that's the same size and shape as their body, and
It's amazing.
because they can change color so quickly. The squid will go dark, and then it will jet away and leave this blob of ink that's the same size and shape and darkness. And when it does that, it changes from dark to light, so it's not dark anymore. So if a predator is going after it, it'll go after the pseudomorph instead of the squid.
Who discovered that? Because that's just such a cool deep ocean discovery.
I don't know. It's been known for quite a long time, though.
Oh, okay. It wasn't you, was it, Mike?
No, it wasn't me.
Speaking of weird squid facts, you and I were chatting kind of in the background about sort of how this is the giant version of the purple-back flying squid, and there are other purple-back flying squid which are much smaller. And then you taught me about the concept of sneaker males, which I feel like should have a thread on Reddit. Can you please explain what they are?
Yeah, squids only mature one time, but they can mature. Some of them will mature at a smaller size, and some of them will grow big before they get mature. And in species where the males protect the females, they guard the females so that other males won't come and mate with them during the mating season. There are males that will mature small and they'll make themselves look like females. They'll use the same patterns of chromatophores, the color patterns on the body and stuff like that, and the same small size as the females. And so they'll look like a female and they'll get up close, and the male, the big guarding male, won't pay any attention to them because it thinks it's just another female. And so while it's trying to fight with another big male or something like that, the little sneaker male will come in and quickly mate with the female. And it's been documented in a bunch of different cephalopod species. And the little ones are called sneaker males.
I just feel like r/beta males would have a field day with that. It seems so like pickup artist worthy. Anyway.
Yeah, I make jokes about it when I'm teaching, as far as what happens in bars and that sort of thing.
Someone else on TikTok also wanted to know, they were surprised that squid swim with they said little hat, which I thought was so adorable, instead of their arms. Can you explain how that works? And I'll try and bring up some footage where we see their little hat.
Yeah, what they're talking about is the fins. So that's actually what a biologist would refer to as the posterior end, or the back end of the body, whereas the arms are at the anterior or front end of the body. A squid can go either way. They can go pointy end first, or they can go arms first. They're very maneuverable.
Wow.
But hydrodynamically, it's more efficient to go with the fins forward and then sort of dragging the arms behind. And they actually have membranes on the arms that they can spread out and use them sort of like airfoils or hydrofoils.
Is that what we can see there with the side arms here, some fin?
Yeah, exactly. It's using that to hold up the heavy head end of the body as it moves forward with the fins or by jetting.
And then
so the one that's coming in, the one that's coming into the lure and the bait, you said that's typical behavior of it approaching a food source or a prey source. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is. When they're interested in a prey, usually what they'll do is they'll line up on it with the arms pointed towards it, and we call it oriented towards the prey. And then they'll come in, and generally they'll shoot out the two longer tentacles. You can see the tentacles attaching there. And then once they've got the prey and the tentacles, they'll pull it in and hold it in the 8 arms and hold it like that until they take a bite out of it with the beak, which is right in the middle of all those 8 arms.
And then they have like a tiny little beak, and then they can only take.
Well, they actually have a fairly large beak.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you see the eye right there on that one. The beak is about the same size as the eye.
Wow.
Wow.
But another thing that a lot of people don't realize is they've got a really, really complex brain, but the esophagus, the food tube, goes right through the middle of the brain. So they can't swallow big bites of food. They have to bite fairly small pieces with their beaks to swallow it, so it will actually go through the brain and back towards the stomach.
So, wow, that's kind of gross.
Whoa.
They have donut-shaped brains, right?
Well, it's basically donut shaped. Yeah, it's a lot more complex than that because there's all different lobes doing different things. But it's donut shaped because the esophagus is going right through the middle of it.
And is it true that this helps them get information to their eyes? That's like the shape of the brain is optimized to communicate with the eyes, which are their most powerful sense. I mean, the size of the eye on that thing is massive. How well would they be able to see?
That's a good question. And how well it can see depends on a lot of different things, like how dense the photoreceptors are on the retina and how much light is available. So if they're in really dark environment and so on. But as far as your point about the brain being structured so that it gets information from the eyes. The eyes are right there by the brain. And the two largest parts of the brain, the two largest lobes are the optic lobes, one on each side, which is they're located between the eye and the rest of the brain. So they are very close to the brain and get immediate information. The brain does a lot of other things like controlling the chromatophore patterns and controlling the muscles and all that other stuff as well.
Do you help with any like biomimicry technology, Mike? Like it seems like squids have all these cool superpowers that we would love to appropriate on land, like being able to see planets unaided and changing our skin patterns to blend in when I see someone I don't want to talk to in public. Like, do you work on things like that?
I don't actually work on that. One of the top experts on that is a guy at Woods Hole named Roger Hanlon. And he's been working on those kinds of questions for his whole career. So
is he as antisocial?
basically what I work on is deep sea stuff, which we don't know nearly as much about as the things that you can catch close to a lab like Woods Hole, where you can put them in a tank and do experiments with them, that sort of thing. So that they've done a lot of work on that in places like Woods Hole.
Ah. Mattie, Nick, do you guys have any questions?
I guess I was just wondering, so we're talking a little bit about light sensitivity and whether the white lights were attracting or deterring the squid, at least on the Red Sea expedition.
And just an important thing to add to that before you continue, the red light here, the squid can't see. Is that right? This is invisible to them and we can see them, but they can't see it.
They probably can't see it. Squids are in general are colorblind. There's one species that may be able to see color. Mm-hmm. And there's been some evidence that cuttlefishes have a different way of seeing color than other things do. But squids probably can't see the red light because most of the light in their environment is in the blue-green part of the spectrum. So they're adapted to pick up the blue-green light. And
this here is what Mattie's talking about, which is white light.
Yeah.
Regular. Yeah. Sorry. Keep going, Mattie.
No, that's okay. It's all part of the question. So I think I was just wondering if there have been different records of sensitivities between species, or if that work has been done by anyone.
Yeah, people have looked at those types of questions, not just for squids, but for lots of different deep sea animals, including squids. So the people like Edie Witter and Tammy Frank down in Florida are very interested in the sensitivity of eyes, deep sea animal eyes, to different wavelengths and how much of the wavelength is present in various depths in the water and that sort of thing.
How would you even measure that?
I don't. They do, but they use photometers and I've been on cruises with Edie where she was doing behavioral things. So she was addressing one question about the light generating capabilities of these vertically migrating animals is whether or not they can shift the color, because the color spectrum would change a little bit depending on where they are in the water column. And so she was doing experiments with cameras, low light cameras, looking up from underneath at a squid. And what she did was confirm the hypothesis that they do shift the color spectrum a little bit, depending on, I think it changed with temperature, but they were also changing the light that was coming down from above.
Yeah, I've seen photos from her work. She was on board with us relatively recently, and she showed some of those, and I just thought it was incredible.
She's so brilliant. Like, I feel like she pops up everywhere. Like, oh yeah, I did a cool.
She's one of those official geniuses.
Yes, exactly, exactly.
OG, me with her.
Edie, if you're watching this, you're an official genius.
The goat says so. Any other questions before I wrap this up?
I have a question. So, because one of my big questions was the pseudomorph,
Yeah.
question that Erica asked, because that didn't get included in the video. So,
I didn't
would
see
a
any
giant,
pseudomorphs.
but would the concept of that, would a giant squid technically have that capability? I mean, I know there hasn't been a lot captured, but would something that large, would that also be translate to a giant squid?
It might. Like you said, we haven't documented it, so we don't actually know.
That would be such a lot of ink.
I'm not sure that they would have as much need of it, because that's a defense against visual predators, and the big predators on giant squids are the whales, of course, toothed whales, which they're not using visual methods. They're using sonar basically to chase the squids.
And sperm whale eye is
There are-
notoriously bad, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's like a tiny little.
Yeah, it's not very big. The giant squids have the biggest eyes, either giant squids or colossal squids, depending on which side of that argument you want to get on. But they have the biggest eyes of any living thing.
Wow.
Supposedly to see stimulated bioluminescence as they're being chased by a big whale.
I would do anything to be able to see what a giant squid sees down there, because there's so much bioluminescence, which I think is like a fact that needs to make its way into the mainstream, and hopefully will soon, with our work, and like Will Smith winning one of our subs to view bioluminescence is coming out in a series soon. And I think like when you realize that the whole ocean is alive with these glowing particles, and then you combine that with creatures that have eyes the size of dinner plates, that they must just see in like, it must be like living in Avatar, I think. And
yeah, it's an alien environment.
Yeah. And they have Sam Perkis, the guy who made me actually interested in marine rocks, was on our boat, and he's like, I just got off the phone with my colleague at NASA, and he said that the giant squid, with its eye, the capabilities of its eye, it would be able to see Pluto unaided. And I was just like, that is amazing. Like, they must have dissected the eye and looked at the different lens formations. Or do you know much about squid eyes, Mike?
I know that people have been asking me to send them giant squid eyes for many years.
Oh,
I don't
God.
think anybody's ever done the work on the retina of a giant squid eye. Everybody wants to look at how densely packed with photoreceptors the giant squid's eye is. And I don't think anybody's actually done that work yet.
Mattie was on board with a bunch of interns recently who were packaging up giant octopus eyeballs. What did you guys do with those? I saw pictures of like an eye in a bag.
Yeah, those went to our collaborators at the University of the Azores. But
Okay, cool.
there were definitely a lot of collections that were contributed for that program, which was awesome, because then the students actually got to get hands-on, a deep sea creature, look at the scale of the eye along with the scale of the body size, even though the body wasn't complete in the form that it was donated to us.
Right.
I can't really talk too much about it, but because I'm not allowed to.
We found them. We didn't fish them.
Yeah, they were contributed to us by scientists that had found them. But anyway, so then getting the students to look under the microscope at chromatophores, and then also getting them to look under the microscope at these eyes, and using different wavelengths of light to illuminate than what was on the slide with the eyes, was a really, really great example for them of just how complicated some of these deep sea or deep mesopelagic organisms can be, and how they utilize eyes as their primary sort of function in the world that they live in. It's pretty interesting.
It's amazing. Cool. Well, Mike, if I come across any giant squid eyes that are not being used, I will direct them to you. Nick and
I have
Mattie.
one in my lab, and everybody wants to cut it up, but I'm not letting anybody cut it up.
Don't do it. Yeah. Everybody,
Don't
I feel like every scientist I know has some like valuable thing in their freezer.
It's a new heist film. We've got to break in to get Mike's giant squid eye.
I think that's a new docu-series. We just go into, fridges, freezers.
Yeah, it's like, what was that one with the storage unit, Storage Wars or something? But ours could be like -80 wars or like science freezer wars. I'm just gonna go out on a limb though and say that I feel like Ocean Explorer would win that.
Yeah, that freezer's probably, you're gonna be filling up. It's gonna be like a cursed antiques collection soon.
Oh no.
From the depths. Well, thanks for joining me, everybody, in the middle of your workday. This got some great comments. People were very interested, and it's because you guys sharing your knowledge, and so it's been a lot of fun, and hopefully we will be able to do this with our next giant insert thing here, discovery from the deep.
May I just say one more thing? I really like the message that you put together with the YouTube video, which was, don't just jump on your first guess as to what you're seeing, but find the right person. A lot of times on the internet, you'll see nobody knows what this is. Well, usually that's not true. Sometimes it is. But usually there's somebody that does know what it is. I like the fact that you've emphasized that.
I do too. Props to Nick and Mattie for that. And, to find the people who are the experts in this seems like the Tree of Life might be a good place to start.
Yeah, it's a lot more complicated than that.
I already told Mike that any weird deep sea animal, he's my first call.
I'll be happy to hear it.
That is quite an honor, honestly. Like Mattie's network, that's a big deal.
Cool.
Yep. All right,
Looking forward to it.
Have a good one.
Thank you, guys.